So this video is an overview of the Cisco Firepower Management Center dashboard and the FMC REST API. What we're looking at here is the overview page of the dashboard UI. You may be familiar with this tool. If you're not, full explanation of it is beyond the scope of this video, so I suggest that you go to YouTube, search for Cisco Firepower and Todd Lammle. Now, Todd is an expert on network configuration and administration. These are very good videos. I found them very useful. The two that you should look at is the overview that we're looking at here and the video on access control policies. So again, very good background to start with, and I suggest you start with that. But for the purpose of this, what I'm going to show you is that any operation that I can do here on the dashboard, for example, if I want to look at devices, and there's going to be latency here, so bear with me. The dashboard will show me a list of devices that are on the FMC. I can do the same thing over here with the REST API. Now, the REST API, it's a RESTful platform that will framework that will allow you to programmatically, make requests to the service and do just about any operation that you can do in the dashboard. So, if I wanted to get configuration information for this device, we'll call it 157. We can go over here. We click on the left nav. All the services are here on the left nav. So I've clicked devices, and here we can see the service is devices, device records. And we have all the operations that are supported. These are the standard HTTP operations that this service supports. Get for retrieve, put for write or update, post for create, and delete for delete. So we're going to click get, and that brings up it sets us up for a request. So if I do a get right now, I'm going to get or retrieve all the data for all the devices on this FMC. That means both of these, 157 and 159, because I didn't specify a specific one. If I wanted to do that, I have to copy the ID for one of them and plug it in here in object ID. But before we do that, let's take a quick look at what response we did get. Let's just look at that. And paste this in here. And, I highly recommend that put it into something like Notepad++ so that you can take a good look at the at the hierarchy here of the JSON. This edit box is less than optimal, so go ahead and take a look here. For each device, this is the amount of information we get for device. This is 159 right here, and this is 157. Now you're going to notice all we see here is we're going to get the name, the ID, the type. Type is always the same. It's always a device object. That's all we're getting. That's not enough information. Well, the reason for that is because the way the REST API is designed is that it is terse by default. So if we want the full response data, we have to put in a query parameter expanded. Set it to true. Then we go. Okay. We get that, and as you can see, I'm scrolling through, we get far more data. This is very full, and it has name, description, model ID, model number, health status, health policy, access policy, host name, license capabilities, etc., etc. So that's how you get all of it. And anytime you do a get on all, keep in mind you have to use that expanded query parameter. Now, previously I said that what if I would just want to look at the data for 157? Okay. I don't use the name. The REST API wants the ID. So I have to scroll through here and find the ID is at the top. It's a UUID. Copy that. Plug it in object ID. Now, thing to keep in mind, the expanded parameter doesn't work for an individual query. You see I got an error because it's not supported. So I have to, it's only supported if I'm getting all. And that's just to prevent, that was designed to prevent too much verbosity. If there were a lot of devices on the system, or there's a lot of access control policies, you could get a huge amount of data back. So now I got rid of the query parameter. I get thinking success. All right. So I just put my cursor in here, click Control A, and I pull all of that. Out, and I'm going to replace this. And as we can see, this time I only got data for one device. The device is name 157. All right. Now, let's look at some of the other services. We looked at devices, which are fairly simple. And before I move on, note that there are other things I can do to a device. I can update that device using using put. I can, if I now post, what post does is it adds a device to the system. It doesn't really create a virtual machine. That you have to set that up beforehand, and there will be that's also beyond the scope of this. So but if you want to add a device to the FMC, then you would use post, and then delete would just remove it from the FMC. It doesn't actually delete the VM. Right. So another thing we could do here is we can look at access control policies. So in the dashboard's policies, access control again. And here I've defined several test policies. You can do the same, explore through here. One we'll look at is traffic block ACP. So ACP has a number of roles defined for it. We'll get into roles in a little bit, but you can also create. Now, if I want to create a policy, what I can do is go back. On the previous page, there's the list here. I would click New Policy, and I would fill this out with, test policy. Select a base policy for it. I could select one of the other ones. Traffic block, and I assign it to one of the devices. But we're not going to do that. We've already defined one. Let's look at traffic block ACP. Now, when I click on that, I'm getting all of this information from traffic block. If I wanted to do the same thing in the REST API, I would go to Policy, Policy Access Policies, click on that. Click Get. Over here, it sets up a request for me. I click on Get. And we get JSON response data. And if we look at it, again, what we see is just the bare bones name and ID for each one of the policies that was defined on this page. So, for example, I expect to see, all the policies that were defined on this page, I'm going to expect to see initial AC, which is right there. I expect to see traffic block ACP, which is right here. I expect to see intrusion prevention, and it's right there. Now that's only useful if you want to get the ID for each one and do a query. That may be enough, but if I want the full data for all of those, I would either put in expanded equals true for the query parameter, or I can just request data for one of them. Now I'm going to take traffic block ACP, take that UUID, plug it in here, and get. So let's take a look at it. All right, so this is the JSON that defines all the relevant data for that one policy called traffic block ACP. What does it give us? Well, it gives us the name and ID. It gives us a description if I defined one. If I defined one in that dialog when I created it. In fact, I can show you where that is. That appears. This title corresponds to name. This corresponds to description. And default action. And default action, where is it? Well, I have to scroll down because I defined so many rules that it's down at the bottom of this list. You specify that right here. So for this policy, it's access control block all traffic. That's why it's called traffic block. But I could select something else. I could trust all traffic. I could make it much more permissive. I could give it intrusion prevention. So each policy is going to have its own default action. And there's a separate service for defining and retrieving the default action separately. It also refers to has a rules object which refers to these rules. Now, as you can see, it doesn't list explicitly every rule that's in the access control policy. I defined several of them, maybe 10. For testing purposes, they're not listed here. If I want that, there's a separate access rules service, and we can take a look at that. It's under policy. It's actually, so there's a trick here. It's actually a sub-policy, a sub-service under access policy. So you would click this in the API client, and then you'll see two sub-resources under access policies. You have to provide a specific UUID for one policy. So it's access policies, the policy ID, and access rules. Likewise, if you wanted the default action, I referred to that service, access policies, the policy ID, and then default actions. But let's look at rules. Click Get on that. Do a get. Okay, so it gave me an error because I didn't provide it with something that it needs, which is the policy ID. So we are looking right now at traffic block ACP. It doesn't want the name, it wants a UUID. Copy that. Where do I put it? Well, I put it right here. And then click Get. Put it there. Right. It does kind of like to have it in a specific order. Let's try it again. I plug it in, click Get now. Okay, so now you'll see this is the correct, what you want to see is when it sets up the query or the request, you're going to see access policies, there's the policy ID right there, and then access rules. So now the request is set up The URI is correct. Click Get. And now it returns the JSON for that. And what is this JSON? Well, this JSON is a list of roles. Items is an array. Inside that array, you're going to find several roles. Each one of these brackets defines an object, a role object. So what you see inside a role object is going to be type, name, and ID. Okay, that's the minimal. What I really need, I want all of it. So what I put in, expanded equals true. Get that? Okay. Okay, so now we see, now I'm going to, you can see this, as I scroll through, there's a lot more JSON here. There's a lot more data. And if I look at one rule object, here's the list of items, starts here with this array bracket. Look how long look how long the data is for that one object. That's one rule. Okay. Now, say, well, they're indexed. This is rule 1, so that corresponds to the position of the rule in this list. So what is the actual name of that rule? Well, it is, can't find it. Which is why we have search. Right. So the point here was just because the rule index is number 1, it's the first rule in the list. What is it? Rule number 3. The actual name of the rule is rule number 3. Mandatory allow. So rules, as you can see, have quite a lot of data. There's a lot of configuration to them. If I were to open one up, I'll open this up. We get this dialog, and you can see it has, I think, 10 tabs, something like that, that define, you know, the source and destination zones, the available networks, the VLAN tags, realms and users, what application filters that you define, ports, URLs, categories and URLs. SGT is a security group tab, and then inspection. Now, the inspection tab is kind of one place where you define intrusion policy, variable set, and file policy. Then you can specify logging on the logging tab, and finally comments. That's a lot of configuration in this one dialog. So you can see why there's going to be also a lot of corresponding data here in the JSON. Now I'm just going to look at one. For example, we can look at VLAN tags. Okay, so this particular rule has 2 VLAN tags, and we can just find them here in the JSON. Okay, they're not too far down. And as we see in VLAN tags, you're going to have a list of objects. Here's the first tag, engineering VLAN 1 and engineering VLAN 2. There they are. So anything, the point is, anything that you see here in the dashboard UI, you probably will be able to retrieve it or update it in the JSON using the REST API. So that's the first part of this overview, and we'll continue later.